Let's open up our Bibles to Romans chapter 12. And we're going to work our way through verse 2, hopefully touch also on Psalms 1. It is such a privilege for me to be here this morning, and my heart is full of joy. I'm struggling a little bit with my breathing, but my heart is full of joy. Truly. What a happy day. Now, whenever we talk about holiness and growth in holiness and spiritual disciplines, oftentimes I will notice an inclination of the head. The head will drop because people are very aware that they have not devoted themselves to the devotions as they ought. They have not grown as they ought, and that there's something lacking in them. They have, to some degree or some measure, they have failed. That's true with any man, no matter how spiritual, any woman, no matter how much they have grown in Christ. Whenever I teach on spiritual disciplines or I teach on the necessity to read the Word or to pray, I always want you to keep this in mind. His mercies are new every morning. I have been walking with the Lord for getting close now to 35 years. That is my verse. That's my text. There's not enough paper in the world, not enough trees to cut down to write down how many times I have failed the Lord, how many times I have gone astray. Mercies new every morning. You know, sometimes I've actually done things and sensed the forgiveness of God to such a degree that I almost felt like he was wrong. You can't do this. And he couldn't. It would be wrong for him to forgive me as many times as he has forgiven me, except that Christ died in my place. What a wonderful thing to actually walk through a door where the love really is unconditional. And you say, oh, Brother Paul, you talk that way, people will run wild. No, the unconditional love of God will drive you much further and much faster than a whip. How could you love me this much? That's a mystery of the ages. How could you love me this way? And so, we talk about prayer. I know that you're thinking, man, my lack of devotion is evident. I don't pray as I ought. We talk about reading the Word, my lack of devotion. I don't read as I ought. But what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to sit there and dwell on the past. I want you to think about now. I want you to think about rising up now and seeking to obey God in His strength. And every time you fail, I want you to go back to the same thing. Christ died on Calvary so that His mercies might be new every morning. You see, here's one of the things the devil will always do, and how you can always tell his voice. When you sin, he will tell you, run away. Run away. And if you even think about not running away, you hypocrite. Just yesterday, Paul, you sinned. Go. What would God want with someone like you? Go. And so you have this, I call it kind of a hockey mentality, in which when you've sinned, go sit in the penalty box for at least several days, depending on the magnitude of the sin. Don't think about raising your head. And then after a while, you've done a certain degree of, mourning. Then, you can come back, but I've got my eye on you. God never speaks that way. God will come to you and tell you you have sinned, and He will say it so clear that it will literally break your heart in two. But if it's God's voice, He will always come back and say, now return to me. Return to me. Run. Run to me. I've sinned. I can't run to Him. You've sinned. You must run to Him. You're saved. And do it quickly before He reaches you, because He's already started running. And see, that's why I'm so glad that my security doesn't depend on my devotional life. I'm so glad that my salvation doesn't depend on the most spiritual nanosecond I've ever had, because it would not be enough to save me, to keep me. But his blood, that'll do it. That'll do it. Isn't it amazing? Now I will get to my text, I promise. But isn't it amazing that the Apostle Paul, so devout, so many years, so much hardship, so much devotion, he went to heaven for the same reason the thief did. The murderous bandit hanging on a tree. Some people get mad about that. I happen to really like that, because if it was any other way, I would not be going to heaven and would have no confidence for heaven. One day, walking around heaven, I'm not going to run up to you and then call a whole bunch of people and say, hey, come here, come here, come here. I want to tell you every wonderful thing that Sean did for Jesus in order to glorify Jesus. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab a hold of Sean, and then I'm going to say, hey, everybody, come here, come here. I'm going to tell you everything that Jesus did for Sean. See the difference? I need no other argument. I'll never finish it. I need no other plea. It is enough that Jesus died, and that he died for me. So every time you talk about Jesus, you cry. You can't live this long and see that much faithfulness, that much mercy, that much unconditional love without it breaking your heart every time you open your mouth. Well, let's get to our text. Romans 12, verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, which is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, just by way of review, he's urging them to do the greatest thing a person can do, to give the greatest sacrifice possible, to offer their lives, that one life you have, unto God. Lock, stock, and barrel. Every bit of it to God. That's what he's urging you to do. Then he gives you a great motivation, the mercies of God, and that's what I've been talking about. So actually, I have been preaching my text. The mercies of God are the thing that motivates us. And those mercies are most revealed in the cross of Calvary. And then as we go on through our life and through our failure and through our weakness, we see that power that was demonstrated on the cross magnified over and over and over again. We're to give our lives because of him, because of his goodness, because of his kindness. We're to present our bodies a living and holy sacrifice, a sacrifice that's acceptable to God. And that's the most spiritual thing we can do. Here in the New American Standard, it says your spiritual service of worship. The word can also be translated reasonable service of worship. As I get to this text, knowing that this world today is filled with so many men who call for absolute devotion and so many cults, I want you to know it is never reasonable to give your life to a man, to give yourself lock, stock, and barrel to even a people or a thing that calls itself a church. But it is always reasonable to give yourself to Christ, to offer yourself to God. Now, I want to look at the larger picture of this text. In verse 1, he's calling us to offer our lives as a living sacrifice. And he tells us that sacrifice ought to be holy and alive. But then in verse 2, he tells us how we can prepare that sacrifice, how we can grow in transforming grace, that we might be acceptable to God, that we might be pleasing to God. And then, after becoming conformed to the image of Christ, dealing with that matter, he goes on, how do we serve him? And if you notice, he begins to talk about the church. We serve him in the context of the people of God. Now, most of you know how strongly I feel about family and how we ought to do what the Bible commands with regard to the family. But I want to preach against, just for a moment, this idea that you've done everything you should do as a Christian just because you homeschool and do a good job in your family, because that's not true. You are called to do a good job in your family. You're called to obey every command God gives you with regard to the family, but your ministry does not stop there. If it does, there's something truncated, something wrong. Because he goes immediately now to your service among the people of God, identifying your spiritual gift, growing in your spiritual gift, and ministering according to that spiritual gift within the body of Christ. And he's not talking about some invisible universal body without a name. He's talking about a local congregation, a local church, where the rubber hits the road with regard to your service, and you're demonstrating that you really are doing something. It's so easy to love the big picture. It's so difficult to serve individuals, you see. Very important. Now, let's go on and look at the text. How do we prepare this sacrifice? How can we be a pleasing sacrifice to God? Verse 2, do not be conformed to this world. So starting out, you need to realize something. Before we get to the do's, we have to look at the don'ts. It doesn't matter how many times I take a bath every day. If I keep going back to the same waller, if I keep going back to the same mud hole right after my bath, you need to know something. There are places you do not belong. There are things you should not do or participate in. There are things that you should not even listen to. There are things that should not be mentioned among you. You must understand this. There must be a degree of separation. Why? Well, first of all, look, the devil is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So I'm not afraid of the devil. You know nothing. You know nothing. You've never seen him. You know nothing. That mouth of his is a pit, full of rotting flesh and dead men's bones. If you had half the spiritual sense you ought to have, you would be terrified to move in his realm. I have seen him take down stronger men and women than those upon whom I'm looking at this moment. There are certain things you should fear. You should be afraid. And then there's not only that, there's the influence of the world. Paul says, even with regard to, and when he gets to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and there's this denial of the idea of a resurrection, he throws in there something you don't expect. He said, bad company corrupts good morals. That not only their ethic was being influenced by ungodly, unbiblical influences, but even their doctrine, their manner of thinking. And that's where it all starts. It all starts in the mind. Doubts. Hath God said? Hath God said? Are you sure about that? And then there's the distrust we should have for ourselves. I heard a father one time, it was amazing. His young boy was 15 or 16 years old and wanted to go out and do something, go out to somewhere with this young lady, and he said, no, I don't believe you have, no, you shouldn't. Not in this instance, no. And a man was standing there listening and says, "What's wrong? Don't you trust your son?" He goes, "No, I don't trust my son. I don't trust his dad." You're all too trusting in yourself. It'd only take a few failures, hopefully, to turn your thinking on. I do not trust myself. I know something of my weakness, and even if I haven't experienced it all, I've read the scriptures, and the scriptures tell me of my weakness. There are things I will not do, places I will not go, and people I will not be with. I must protect myself. Now, holding your place there in Romans, run over to the book of Psalms and look at what we have here, chapter 1. How blessed is the man, blessed. Very difficult word, very difficult word. It's just like a huge bag or container filled up with everything that comes out of a right relationship with God. I mean, you could spend days just going through what it means to be blessed, but it's someone who is walking in a right relationship with God and has God's favor and God's care. God is intimately acquainted with this person and intimately acquainted sovereignly with his ways, guiding, protecting, above, below. And what's this blessed man like? How blessed is the man who does not. Isn't that amazing? Usually when people talk about how can I be blessed, especially these TV preachers, it always starts with what you should do. Well, what you should do really doesn't matter if you don't get a hold of what you should not do. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. Many Hebrew scholars believe there's a progression here. There may be, but we have to be careful with the nuance. And then when you look at it, first of all, does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. This is denoting an acquaintance with the wicked and coming under the wicked's influence. You've aligned yourself so that you're walking now with them. You're hearing their counsel. And it begins to have its impact. It says, does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners. Now what you've done is you're no longer just being influenced. You have adopted their ways. You have become one with them. And then here's probably the most horrific because I've seen it. I've seen it so many times, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. So first you come under their influence, then you adopt their ways, then you sit with them against the godly. And you speak against the godly, and you mock the godly. I saw this happen in seminary. I went to a seminary that was far more liberal than my pastors imagined, than I knew when I first got there. And I saw young men who, when they got there, believed the Bible, would go out witnessing on the streets and all sorts of things. And by the end of their 3 years, they scoffed at such things. And they scoffed at someone who tried to walk in piety. And they scoffed at those who spoke of hell and heaven. And please, what you've got to understand is, I am now Paul the aged. I'm not young anymore. I fear this more now than I did when I was young. I have more reason to fear it. I choose my friends very, very carefully. I choose what I watch with great care, what I listen to with great care, what I read. Why? For the preservation of my soul. This is not just about going to heaven and get a reward. This is the difference between heaven and hell. Fighting the good fight and not coming under ungodly influence. So before we get to verse 2, where he's delighting in the law of the Lord, there are things he should not do. He should not do. Do you see that? Now, let's go back again to Romans. Do not be conformed to this world. The idea here is literally, imagine, when I was in Peru, we made adobe bricks for church buildings, for buildings, different things like that. And what you do is you've got this square box, it's about this big. You put sand in it, you wet it, put some sand in it, and then you put the clay in it, you press it down, and then you flip it over, and the Amazon sun hardens that brick. And what's amazing, you walk out and there will be hundreds of these bricks, and they all look alike. How is it that they all look alike? They all look alike because they've been pressed out of the exact same mold. That's the idea here in the text. Do not be made out of the same mold that the world is made out of, that those in the world are made out of. Don't allow them. You say, well, I won't. Listen to me. Listen to me very carefully. Most of us are awake about 16 hours a day. Unless you're living in a bubble, several of those hours you are coming under the direct influence of the world. In your workplace, in your school, this is unavoidable. But the things that can be avoided must be avoided. They must. They must. You are moldable. You know, there's this big ongoing debate about freedom, free will. But when you want to define it technically, you have to admit that there is only one person who has free will, and that's God. You do not have free will. Why do I say that? Not entirely. Why do I say that? Because you come under the influence of so many people, so many ideas. The context around you is constantly pressing in on you and influencing you so that your ideas and your decisions are not wholly yours, but the influence of those around you. Only God is above that. He's the primal cause. He's the beginning. He's the first and the last. Nothing influences him. He's free from that, but you're not. Neither am I. That is why I must be very careful with my companions. One of the things that I always try to search out is if there's another preacher out there, another man out there that I know, when I leave him, do I always walk away wanting to be more like Christ? Do I walk away wanting to be a better man? You see? You need that. You need to become that for other people also. So he says, do not be conformed to this world. Don't do it. Because you will find yourself sooner or later sitting in the same seat as those in the world, those who are condemned, and mocking the people who are truly seeking to follow Christ. And he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. It is from this Greek word that we get the word metamorphosis. It is this same word that is used of Jesus Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration when he was transformed before the people. There is a real transformation that does occur in the life of a believer by the regenerating power of the Holy Spirit. But then I want you to see this. With regard to our justification, we have no participation. God did that. In our sanctification, God is also working for our sanctification to make us like Christ. But we do participate in that.